Well, in the British Parliament earlier, we saw it all. We saw blows being exchanged verbally, and we saw one being planted on an attacker who tried to put a plateful of shaving foam into the face of one Rupert Murdoch. James Creedon has been watching everything unfold, and online, I expect there's been one or two kind of reactions to this.
There have indeed, Mark. I suppose that attack, which took place about 3 hours into the parliamentary hearing this afternoon, dominated a lot of the discussion. It was the image that remained with an awful lot of people. Even if we look online, in fact, The Independent is leading with that. Rupert Murdoch pelted with foam during hack attack. Now, that was a guy called Johnny Marbles, a comedian who broke into the hearing.
Is that his real name or an assumed name?
I would imagine it's a stage name. Yeah. And certainly he had a big stage today anyway. The whole world was looking at him trying to put foam into Rupert Murdoch's face, and the extraordinary scenes, and I think we have pictures of what happened, where his wife Wendy, at half of Rupert Murdoch's grand old age of 80, she's 41 and looking fit as a fiddle, and managed to give him a left hook. And indeed, one of the most virulent and vocal MPs in this whole hacking scandal, Labour MP Tom Watson, at the end said, "Your wife has a very good left hook."
It was a right hand she threw, though.
Well, he was getting his left and his right mixed up. But that was probably the only real lapsus by Tom Watson, who was very, very strong in criticising the Murdochs during their 3 hours of hearing.
I mean, clearly this raises issues about security in the House of Commons, doesn't it? Because if someone can walk in with a paper plate, a plastic bag, and a can of shaving foam or whatever it is, put it all together, walk in and get that close to someone who's giving evidence to MPs, it does raise questions, doesn't it? I mean,
it absolutely does.
Am I being old-fashioned?
I would say that this has served the Murdochs' interests, because this has distracted from some of the less comfortable questions that they were asked repeatedly over the course of 3 hours and 40 minutes. Indeed, because in this hearing, I suppose this parliamentary hearing, it doesn't have any major powers as a parliamentary committee. It will write a report which it will refer to the House of Commons. It can make recommendations.
You're right, though. What it does, it shows that here's an 80-odd-year-old man who can take being, destabilised and attacked this way, sit there and continue.
That's right.
In the eyes of most people watching this and seeing the headlines and reading the headlines about it, which say Murdoch attacked during this thing, will actually probably have a bit of sympathy.
What was the most important thing about this committee for the Murdochs was the image that it sent out, and that was the image that will remain with most people. And in fact, what was, I suppose, foremost on the Murdochs' mind was how will shareholders react to this? We're trying to convince our own company, News Corp, that we are in charge, that we can lead this company into the future. James Murdoch, the heir apparent, who many have been saying can't continue and can't lead the company into the future, given how he has managed this crisis, given the fact that he paid hush money to alleged hacking victims in the past, showing that perhaps he had a greater awareness of things than he would say he has. So they were trying to convince shareholders that they are in a position to lead the company into the future. What does the stock market say? Stocks went up by 5% in News Corp. So people are convinced that they did a good job and that they can lead the company into the future. Just in terms of how they dealt with this, because it was a major PR exercise, three major elements, I think. There was a lot of apologising, a lot of contrition, they expressed shame. That was one key element. Indeed, Murdoch said, "This is the most humble day of my life," at the beginning and at the end. Secondly, they consistently kicked the ball into touch on the specifics. They were asked questions about specific elements of what you knew, at what point you knew it, when were you told this, how often did you speak to the editors? James Murdoch would repeatedly say, "I do not have direct knowledge." Rupert Murdoch said on numerous occasions, "I don't know anything about that." So they were kicking the ball into touch on specifics. And thirdly, despite all of the distancing of themselves from the facts on the ground, or the alleged crimes, Rupert Murdoch was also trying to show that he was in fact in charge, and that was a very difficult line to tread. On one hand, to say I'm in charge, I'm the boss, but on the other hand, to say the buck didn't really stop with me. I trusted people to deal with this, and they betrayed me.
There was an element of Pontius Pilate there washing his hands of it a little bit, wasn't in that kind of sense. It wasn't me because I wasn't responsible. I gave that responsibility to somebody else. Although Murdoch is the man who created the whole tabloid ethos. He's the man who created the whole, battling over stories, the sensationalism, the digging up dirt on people, that kind of stuff. He created all this in his papers, in a sense.
And
it's
also
all coming back to bite him, isn't it?
That's right. And, shame was their business, and indeed, or not shame, but scandal was their business, and this is a scandal that has really bounced back and affected the company. And really, you did see at the beginning of that hearing this afternoon, Rupert Murdoch, who was a little bit shaken, I think, a little bit weaker than we have seen him in the past, but he did show a lot more personal strength. He went from strength to strength over those 3 hours, and you saw him thumping the table at one point and actually being quite convincing as a man who was still in charge. And The stock markets seem to be convinced. They went up by 5%.
Although
So
it could just be the custard pie effect.
Right.
The bottom line
Exactly.
is don't mess with Mrs. Murdoch because she's
Right.
got a good right hand and probably good left hook as well.
Right.
And we didn't speak about Rebecca Brooks, who was talking as well, which is obviously the other aspect of this
could talk
amazing
for hours,
story,
Mark,
which
with
will
this
go
one.
on and on. But James sometimes has to sleep, so
Right.
let him go home to bed. James, thank you very much
you, Mark.
indeed. James Creedon, our man with the Media Watch.